Rain poured heavily over the small chapel as whispers rippled through the rows of stunned guests. The scent of roses and wet earth mingled with tension so thick it could choke the air itself. Everyone turned to the entrance, where she stood, drenched and trembling, but her eyes burned with a wild determination. "Daniel, don't marry her!" she cried, her voice echoing against the marble walls. The bride, a vision in white lace, turned pale. "Clara, what are you doing?" she whispered, disbelief trembling on her lips. Clara's gaze shifted between the bride, her best friend Lily, and the groom, Daniel, the man she once loved in secret, the man who now looked at her with rage instead of warmth. The murmurs grew. Guests pulled out phones. The priest froze. Clara's heart pounded like a drum of war. She hadn't planned this. Not really. But when she discovered what Lily had done, the lies, the manipulation, she couldn't stay silent. "She's been cheating on you, Daniel," Clara said, voice cracking. "For months with your business partner, Henry." Gasps erupted. Lily's bouquet slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. Daniel's face twisted, betrayal, disbelief, fury, all at once. He looked at Lily, who couldn't meet his eyes. "Daniel, please. I can explain." But he didn't let her. He stormed out of church, pushing past the guests. Clara followed, heart pounding, desperate to explain that she hadn't done this for herself, that she only wanted to save him. Outside, under the storm, he turned on her. "You ruined everything," he hissed. "Was that your revenge for me choosing her over you?" Tears mixed with the rain. "No, Daniel, I did it because you deserve the truth. She never loved you." His jaw clenched, his chest heaving with rage. "And you do." She said nothing. The silence was enough of an answer. What happened next blurred in a storm of emotions. Weeks of anger, guilt, and strange comfort. Daniel's heart, shattered by betrayal, found an unexpected solace in Clara's presence. But it wasn't love. It was something darker. He invited her over one night, saying he needed to talk. The air between them was charged, fragile. His voice was cold. "You destroyed my wedding, Clara. Maybe it's time you pay the price." She didn't understand what he meant until his lips crushed against hers, filled with fury and longing. Her body trembled under his touch, her heart torn between resisting and surrendering. He wanted to forget Lily, and he wanted to do it through her. Weeks turned into months. Their twisted connection grew, a cycle of passion, guilt, and unspoken pain. Clara knew it was wrong, but she couldn't let go. She saw glimpses of the Daniel she once loved, hidden beneath bitterness. Then one morning, as dawn spilled through her window, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the pregnancy test in her shaking hand. Positive, her world spun. She pressed a hand against her stomach, feeling both joy and dread. What would Daniel say? Would he hate her more, or would this break the walls between them? When she told him, his reaction was a storm. "You think this will make me love you? That carrying my child will erase what you did?" Clara's tears fell freely. "Daniel, I never wanted this to happen like that. But this baby, he cut her off, voice trembling with restrained emotion, "is the result of revenge. Don't twist it into love." She wanted to scream, to tell him he was wrong. But he walked away, leaving her alone with the echo of rain against the window, the same rain that had fallen on the day she stopped his wedding. Months later, Lily returned. Pregnant, too. Her life had fallen apart. Henry had abandoned her, and she had nothing left. When she showed up at Daniel's door, Clara stood there, her belly round, her heart aching. The three of them, bound by betrayal, guilt, and fate, stood facing each other like ghosts of their former selves. Lily's eyes dropped to Clara's stomach, then back to Daniel. "So, she got what she wanted," Lily said bitterly. Clara's voice shook. "No, Lily, none of us got what we wanted." Daniel looked between them, his face unreadable. For the first time, he didn't look angry, just lost. He stepped forward, placing a hesitant hand on Clara's stomach. "I don't know what to feel anymore," he whispered. "I wanted to hurt you. But now, this child, maybe it's the only pure thing left in all this mess." The wind howled through the open door, scattering petals from Lily's old bouquet still lying by the threshold, remnants of a wedding that never happened. And as Clara met his eyes, something shifted. For the first time, she saw not anger, but the faintest spark of forgiveness. But before she could speak, a voice came from behind, a familiar one, cold and calm. "Seems like you've moved on quickly, Daniel." They turned to see Henry standing there, smirking, and everything shattered all over again. Daniel froze, his hand still resting protectively on Clara's stomach. The sight of Henry standing in the doorway made his pulse thunder in his ears. Rain trailed behind Henry's silhouette like a shadow that refused to fade, his tailored coat dripping water onto the floor. His smirk held no warmth, only satisfaction. "Well," Henry said, his tone cutting through the heavy silence, "I guess congratulations are in order. You always did have a talent for cleaning up my mess, Daniel." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You've got some nerve showing your face here after everything." Henry stepped forward, brushing a lock of wet hair from his forehead. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I didn't come for you." His gaze flicked to Lily, who looked small and broken in the corner. "I came for her." Lily's breath hitched. "You don't get to talk to me," she said softly. "You left me when you found out I was pregnant." Henry chuckled under his breath. "Pregnant? Please, Lily. I told you from the beginning. Our little game wasn't meant to last. You just couldn't handle the rules." Clara's hands clenched at her sides. "You ruined her life. Henry. And for what? A business deal? Your pride." He turned his eyes on her, cold and sharp. "You talk like you're better than her. But from where I'm standing, Clara, you're just another woman who thought sleeping with Daniel would solve her loneliness." Daniel's jaw tightened, his voice dangerously low. "Watch your mouth." "Or what?" Henry stepped closer, their faces inches apart. "You'll hit me? You already stole my company, my fiancé's best friend, and now you've got a baby on the way. Tell me, Daniel, what else do you want from me?" Lily's voice broke between them. "Stop it, both of you." She looked from one man to the other, tears streaking her cheeks. "Do you even hear yourselves? You're fighting over what's left of a disaster you both caused." The room went silent, except for the distant thunder rolling through the sky. Clara's heart pounded as she looked at the man she once thought she could save and the one she had always feared. The two stood locked in a silent battle, pride warring with pain. Henry finally broke the tension with a smirk. "I'll be seeing you again soon, Daniel. You might have won this round, but don't think for a second that the past won't come crawling back to you." He turned on his heel and left, his shoes echoing down the hall like a warning that refused to fade. Daniel exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. He looked older somehow, tired, hollow. Lily sank into a chair, trembling. "He's right," she whispered. "The past doesn't just disappear." Clara wanted to comfort her, but she couldn't, not after everything. Instead, she took a small step back, her hands protectively resting on her stomach. Later that night, Daniel sat alone in his office, the rain tapping softly against the windows. He stared at the flickering fireplace, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. Every decision he'd made in the last year flashed before him. Lily's betrayal, Clara's confession, the night of anger that had changed everything. The door creaked open behind him. "You shouldn't be up this late," Clara said softly, stepping inside. He didn't turn. "Couldn't sleep." She hesitated. "Neither could I." He finally looked at her. She wore one of his shirts, loose around her growing belly. Her hair fell over her shoulders, damp from the shower. There was something fragile, yet resolute in her presence. "You still think I'm a monster," he said quietly. She walked closer. "No, I think you're hurt, and you don't know what to do with it." Daniel laughed bitterly. "You stopped my wedding. Clara, you tore apart everything I thought I knew. And yet here you are, standing in my house, carrying my child." "I didn't mean to fall for you again," she whispered. "But I did, even when you hated me, even when you tried to use me to forget her." He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "You don't understand. Every time I look at you, I see everything I lost." "Then maybe it's time you start seeing what you could still have," she said, her voice trembling. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Daniel stood, stepping closer until he was inches from her. "And what if I'm not ready to forgive you, or myself? Then I'll wait," she said simply, "because I'm not going anywhere this time." His hand lifted, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. For the first time, his touch wasn't out of anger. It was hesitant, searching. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. But before either could say another word, Daniel's phone buzzed on the desk. He frowned. Picking it up, the message on the screen froze him in place. "Asterisk, we need to talk. It's about Lily." "Henry." Asterisk. Clara saw the change in his face. "What is it?" He didn't answer right away. "Henry. He says it's about Lily." Her stomach twisted. "You're not going to meet him, are you?" "I have to," he said firmly. "If he's planning something, I need to know what it is." "Daniel, please. He's dangerous. Don't go alone." But he was already grabbing his coat. "I'll be fine." She followed him to the door, fear tightening her chest. "You promised you'd be here for this baby. Don't make me raise it alone." He paused, glancing back. For the first time, there was a flicker of warmth in his eyes. "I'll come back. I promise." And then he was gone. Hours passed. The rain had stopped, replaced by a cold mist that clung to the city like a ghost. Clara sat on the couch, one hand on her belly, listening for the sound of his car. But it never came. The phone rang suddenly, shattering the silence. She jumped, grabbing it. "Daniel." But it wasn't him. It was Lily. Her voice was frantic. "Clara, you need to come to the old warehouse near the docks. It's about Daniel." Her heart dropped. "What happened?" "Just hurry," Lily said before the line went dead. Clara's hand shook as she threw on a coat and grabbed her keys. Every instinct screamed at her not to go, but she couldn't ignore it. She couldn't lose him, not now. The drive was a blur of headlights and fog. When she reached the warehouse, the door was half open, creaking in the wind. She stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of rust and oil. "Daniel," her voice echoed. No answer. She took another step, the floorboards groaning beneath her. A faint light flickered at the far end of the room. She followed it, her pulse racing. And then she saw him, lying on the ground, blood staining his shirt. "Daniel!" she screamed, rushing to his side. His eyes fluttered open, weak but still burning with that same fire. "Clara!" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Henry knew it was a trap. Tears spilled down her face. "No, no, stay with me, please." Footsteps echoed from the shadows. Henry emerged slowly, a gun glinting in his hand. "I told you, Clara. The past doesn't go away, always comes back for payment." Clara froze, shielding Daniel with her body. "Please, Henry. He needs help. You don't have to do this." Henry tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "Don't I?" He stepped closer, the barrel of the gun trembling slightly. "He took everything from me. My business, my pride, and you. I was never yours," she said through tears. For a moment, Henry's eyes softened. Then his voice dropped, cold and quiet. "Maybe not, but you'll never be his either." The sound of sirens suddenly filled the air, blue lights flashing through the broken windows. Henry cursed under his breath, stepping back. Daniel groaned, reaching for her hand. "Go take the car, get out." But she shook her head fiercely. "I'm not leaving you." Police voices shouted from outside. Henry turned, his face twisted in fury. "You will regret this, Clara," he hissed. And then he disappeared into the dark, leaving the echo of his threat hanging like smoke. Clara clutched Daniel's hand, tears blurring her vision. The paramedics rushed in, voices sharp and urgent. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, his eyes met hers again. "You were right," he whispered weakly. Maybe there's still something left to save." Her heart broke and healed all at once. She followed the ambulance lights into the night, her world spinning again, but this time she wasn't alone. Outside the warehouse, on the wet ground where Henry had stood a moment ago, a single bullet casing gleamed under the streetlight. And far in the distance, someone watched in the shadows, eyes filled with quiet vengeance, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The night Daniel was taken to the hospital, Clara sat in the waiting room, her fingers trembling as they clutched the silver chain he used to wear. The corridor smelled of antiseptic and anxiety, every passing second echoing with the soft hum of machines and distant footsteps. Her heart throbbed with exhaustion, but she refused to close her eyes. Every time she blinked, she saw his face, the pain, the blood, the way he whispered her name before fading into silence. Hours dragged by like centuries until the surgeon finally emerged, his expression unreadable. "He's stable," the doctor said softly. "It was close, but he'll recover with rest." Clara's breath shuddered out of her chest. For the first time in months, relief washed through her like sunlight breaking through rain. She pressed a hand over her mouth, whispering a prayer of gratitude. But relief was fleeting. Days later, when Daniel woke, his memory of that night was foggy. He could recall Henry's eyes, the flash of the gun, Clara's desperate scream. But everything after that was a blur. Clara was there beside him, her hand wrapped gently around his. Her eyes were tired, but full of fierce love. "You should have left me," he murmured, voice rough. "And let you die," she whispered, tears glistening. "No, Daniel, not again." He turned his face toward her. The anger that had once burned between them had dimmed, replaced by something quieter, acceptance. "You're still here," he said softly. "I told you," she replied, a small smile curving her lips. "I'm not going anywhere this time." It took weeks for him to regain his strength. The world outside had moved on, the company, the gossip, even Lily. She had left the city quietly, leaving behind only a note that said, "I hope someday we all forgive each other." It was strange, but Daniel felt no hatred toward her anymore, only the ghost of a love that had never truly existed. As for Henry, he vanished. The police found no trace, no fingerprints, no car, no hint of where he had gone. But sometimes Daniel would wake in the middle of the night, the memory of those cold eyes haunting him. Months passed. The seasons turned. Clara's belly grew rounder with each passing day. Daniel often found himself sitting beside her at dawn, his hand resting on her stomach, feeling the faint kicks beneath her skin. It was a feeling he couldn't describe. Fragile, terrifying, yet impossibly beautiful. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he turned to her and said, "I want to start over, not for redemption, not out of guilt, but because I finally understand what I almost lost." Her eyes filled with tears. "You mean us?" He nodded. "You, the baby, everything." She reached for his hand, their fingers interlocking. "Then promise me something," she said softly. "Anything. When the past tries to come back, and it will, you don't run from it. You face it. With me." He smiled faintly. "That's a promise." Weeks later, under the warm light of the early morning, Clara went into labor. The pain was fierce, primal, but she held on to Daniel's hand like an anchor. Hours of struggle, sweat, and tears passed until a cry pierced the room, a sound so pure it silenced everything else. Daniel's eyes welled up as he saw their baby for the first time. Tiny, fragile, and yet somehow stronger than all the chaos that had brought them here. Clara smiled through her tears, whispering, "She's beautiful." He nodded, voice breaking, just like her mother, in that small hospital room, surrounded by the echoes of their pain and love. Something new began. A life built not on revenge, not on betrayal, but on survival. But peace never came easy. One night, months later, Daniel found an envelope slipped under their door. No return address, just his name written in sharp, precise handwriting. Inside was a single photograph. Henry standing in front of a hotel in another city, a faint smirk on his face, holding a newborn baby. On the back of the photo, one line was written, "Asterisk, you took my life. Now I've taken yours. Asterisk." Daniel's blood ran cold. His hands shook as he handed it to Clara. "He's alive," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And he has a child?" Daniel's mind raced. Was it Lily's baby? Had Henry found her? Was this his way of saying the war wasn't over? Clara reached out and took his face in her hands. "Don't let him win again. He wants to drag you back into the darkness. We're not going there." Daniel looked at her, really looked. The woman who had stopped his wedding, who had shattered his world, who had then pieced it together again. She wasn't just his past anymore. She was his future. He tore the photograph in half, his jaw set. He doesn't control this story anymore. And yet, deep down, they both knew this wasn't the end. Years passed. Their daughter, Grace, grew up with her mother's fire and her father's quiet strength. Daniel rebuilt his company, but he kept his circle small, wary of the ghost that had once nearly destroyed him. Clara wrote again, short stories at first, then novels inspired by her own pain and redemption. Her words became her healing, and in her pages, she found peace. One afternoon, while Clara was reading in the garden, she heard the faint sound of laughter. Daniel was teaching Grace how to ride her bike down the path. The sun glowed gold across the lawn, catching in his hair. For the first time, she saw him not as the broken man she had met years ago, but as someone whole again. He looked up and caught her watching. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. A promise, a memory, a lifetime's worth of forgiveness. She smiled, whispering to herself, maybe love isn't about who saves who. Maybe it's about who stays. But even as she said it, a chill brushed her skin. From across the street, a black car lingered longer than it should have. The driver's face was hidden, but the faint glint of a ring on his finger caught the light. An old family crest she recognized instantly. Henry's crest. The car drove off slowly, disappearing around the corner, but her heart wouldn't stop racing. She stood there in silence, one hand instinctively reaching for the pendant Daniel had given her, the same one she clutched the night he almost died. When Daniel returned, she didn't mention the car. She simply hugged him a little tighter, holding him as if the world could crumble again at any moment. He kissed her forehead, unaware of the shadow that had just passed him by. That night, after Grace was asleep, Clara stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer like distant stars. She knew peace could never truly last, not when the ghosts of their past were still breathing somewhere out there. But she also knew something else. No amount of vengeance, no whisper of revenge could undo the love they had built from the ruins. She turned to look at Daniel, asleep beside her, his arm draped protectively over their daughter. The man who had once been her enemy, her sin, her punishment, was now her home. Outside, the wind rustled softly through trees, carrying the faint echo of a promise unfulfilled. Somewhere far away, Henry watched from the shadows, his eyes colder than before, but now tinged with something new, loneliness. He whispered to himself, almost regretful, I took everything from them, but they still won. Then he turned away, disappearing once more into the night. And in that silence, Clara finally let out the breath she'd been holding for years. She pressed her palm against the window, the city reflecting in her eyes. Life had taken everything from her, and then given it all back in a form she never expected. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't peaceful. But it was real. As the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, Clara whispered, sometimes the most beautiful stories are born from the ugliest beginnings. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew this wasn't just their ending. It was the beginning of everything they were meant to become.